Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast, Season 4. This podcast is for and about people getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, Camino guide and longtime pilgrim Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Hola pilgrims, Nancy here, back in the office after a 4-week trip to Spain and the Camino with a diversion to London for some non-Camino fun. I hope you've enjoyed the past month of episodes, which I had on an automatic release plan while I was away. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but we are just about done with Season 4 of the podcast. Just 2 more episodes, and then I'll be taking a break until August so I can work on some other projects. The main project is going to be getting set up for my Camino experience groups for next year. Can you believe that? I already have a waitlist going for April, May, and September 2025, and I want to be sure you know to get on the waitlist if you are thinking of walking with me and one of my groups next year. How do you do that? Easy. Just follow the link in the show notes or send an email to nancy@thecaminoexperience.com. I will add you to the list. This is a bit time sensitive though, as I am tentatively planning to open registration for the April and May groups this month or in early July. Now, before I get to my guest today, I want to give a shout out to my May Camino Experience group. Wait. There's no way they're listening to this, as they are still on the Camino Frances, making their way to Santiago de Compostela. Oh well, I will give a shout out to them anyway. Amy, Cheryl, Kathy, Helen, Glennis, Rick, Trina, Patty, and Jenny. I am so grateful to have shared in the start of your pilgrimages. What an incredible group. We started walking from Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port on May 12th, after enjoying that pretty city for a couple of days. So they are out there somewhere on the meseta or headed up the next mountain. I also met so many other pilgrims, including John, who was one of my Camino coaching clients, Kurt, who was using my Camino Frances Getting Started audio guide to prepare and get started, and Danielle, who was carrying Tracy's backpack and who was a guest on the podcast in episode 5 of this season. I was also blessed with some beautiful connections with local people who served the pilgrims, like Itziar and her staff at Albergue El Palo de Aviano in Dubiri, Adela at the bar with the best coffee on the Camino, that's in Espinosa del Camino, and Dory at Hotel San Antonio Abad in Villafranca, Montes de Oca. I do have some updates from the trail, some more tips for you, and some more recommendations for people and places to look out for based on my time with the group and also from the stretch I walked before I met up with them. Those updates and tips will be coming in the next episode, which will be the final episode of this season. Now, let's get to today's conversation with first-time pilgrim Paul. Paul is a U.S. military veteran who will be walking the Camino Frances later this year with a nonprofit organization called Warriors on the Way. Warriors on the Way is a pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago, which is designed to facilitate a combat veteran's healing from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and moral injury. Here's what their website says. PTSD and moral injury are both directly linked to an overall reduction in quality of life and increased veteran suicides. The Warriors on the Way pilgrimage for combat veterans, through the reduction of PTSD and moral injury symptoms, improves quality of life and helps in the effort to reduce the veteran suicide rate. The success rate of Warriors on the Way in reducing these symptoms is extraordinary. Father Stephen Rindle, U.S. Army retired, will lead the pilgrimage. Having made multiple pilgrimages focusing on veteran healing Father Steve is an experienced pilgrim, and he has designed this pilgrimage based on those experiences. It's also based on what he learned completing a doctorate in responding to combat trauma and developing and teaching the U.S. Army chaplaincy course on how to provide a ministerial response to moral injury. I had the pleasure of hearing Father Steve speak at an annual gathering of the American Pilgrims on the Camino organization a few years ago, and I was so moved by the work they are doing to assist our veterans. This episode is dedicated to Father Steve and his team to say thank you for the work you're doing. If you would like to support this organization and the life-changing work they're doing, please go to warriorsontheway.org. I have that link in the show notes. Paul's story reminds me that there is always more to a story than what I know or can learn simply by reading or listening to news reports. His is a deeply personal story of courage and resilience in the face of tragedy and trauma. Is Paul a hero? I think he is. So, to Paul and all our veterans, thank you for your service. Let's meet Paul now. Paul, hi. Thank you so much for being with me on the podcast today.
Hi, Nancy. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, actually. And I'm so curious to see where this conversation goes. Because
Likewise.
when you reached out and told me your story, I was, I actually, one of my first thoughts was, I cannot believe my good fortune to have the chance to share this conversation with you. And that will come out as to why that is as we go, as you tell about your story, and I'll share how I knew that I wanted to interview you the moment that I got your email. So what I'd like to do is start where I always start, which is to put the pin in the map. Would you start by sharing with us when you're walking, where you're starting, and how far you're going?
Yeah, so I'm starting in Astorga.
Okay.
And it's going to be about 180 miles walking this September, finishing in October. And I'm very fortunate to be walking with a group called Warriors on the Way, which is a 501c3c veterans nonprofit organization that was organized by Father Steve Rendall. And I applied last year for this opportunity and found out in February of this year that I was accepted. And I'm very excited to be going with this group of other combat veterans to walk the Camino.
I'm already just so moved. I mean, seriously, when I think about the magnitude of this, and part of why I'm so, I think, emotional about it and moved by it is because I've met Father Steve, and I heard him speak at a gathering of the American Pilgrims on the Camino organization, and he shared with us what Warriors on the Way does with and for veterans and the program that they've put together and the transformation that takes place on the Camino for someone who has served in the U.S. military and has come back affected by it. And so I would like to invite you to share with us your story, your personal story of your service in the military, and then we'll look at what Warriors on the Way has to offer.
Sure. So flash forward flash back, I guess, a bunch of years ago. I was like every other kid growing up in America. I grew up in a small rural town in Oregon, not far from the capital of Salem. All my family still lives in that area that are still here. My brother and his wife were actually just here earlier this week. They came up for the solar eclipse. The solar eclipse passed right over our where we live here in northern New York. So that was a pretty moving experience this week.
Wow, you got to see it. Ooh.
That could be a whole nother 2-hour podcast in and of
Right?
itself, just the effect that had. It was amazing, to say the least. And the pictures and the videos you see out there don't do it justice. So back to my story. I graduated high school and I thought I knew what I wanted to do. I was a big runner, ran track and cross country. I was a pretty avid cyclist back in the day then, and I originally wanted to study architecture, but I knew that my abilities were not as good as they needed to be to kind of follow down that path. So my senior year of high school, I messed around. I ended up taking an accounting class, and I was like, oh, I'm pretty good with these smaller numbers, adding and subtraction and stuff versus tangents and degrees. So this is more my speed, and I did really good at it. So I'm going to become a CPA. So I go off to the local community college, commuting back and forth every day from home. And after about a year, I realized I'm in college for all the wrong reasons. I'm not learning anything. This is not me, at least not at this point in time. I now have a master's degree and an MBA. So eventually I got there, but it wasn't directly out of high school. So after my fourth semester of college, I had applied for a position working for a company I knew little to nothing about. A friend of mine told me about the opportunity. I applied. I went and did an in-person interview. They interviewed people from all over the Pacific Northwest. Right before Christmas, I got a phone call from them asking if I could be in Phoenix, Arizona on the 5th of January. I was like, absolutely. So I went and disenrolled from college. I packed up everything I had in my brother's car because my truck wasn't good enough to make it to Arizona. Me and my brother did a vehicle swap, and I hopped in a 76 Ford Maverick with everything I owned that I could fit in that car. And me and my friend Ken, he got the job as well. And we drove down to Arizona. Didn't really know a soul.
What year was that?
That was in 1985.
Okay.
So I did that job for a couple years, a little less than 2 years. I grew up a lot in that time. I was a natural gas line safety inspector for a contractor for a Southwest Gas in Phoenix, Arizona area, and worked all over Arizona. And I got to the point where, okay, I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser, I'm a little bit smarter. So I thought, I want to go back to college. Living on my own, been living on my own since I moved out at 19. How am I going to pay for this? So I did what any smart person would do. I called the local Army recruiter, and the next thing I know, I was in the Army.
Wow.
So I had, like I said, I was an avid skier and runner and mountain biker and climbing stuff, all that kind of stuff back then. And I seen an advertisement in a skiing magazine in 85 sometime that talked about the reformation of the 10th Mountain Division up at Fort Drum, New York. And they were talking about skiing and rock climbing and snowshoeing and all this stuff that I did already. I was like, that's perfect. That's me. Let me sign up.
Okay, wait a minute. So you were going to be able to join the Army and do all those things that you love to do. Is that the picture in your mind?
That's the picture in my mind. That's what they told me. That's what this article said. That might not be exactly what happened.
Okay, let's find out what happened.
So I joined the infantry. I ended up serving a little over 21 years. I only signed up for 3, but I signed up for the college money and go to my duty assignment. So I got stationed up here near where I live now at Fort Drum, New York, eventually, after I completed my training down at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is now Fort Moore, Georgia. And then I came up here, and I ended up liking what I did. I liked the Army. I liked the job. I wasn't climbing and doing all this stuff. We did a little bit, it wasn't like what I thought originally, but I still liked it. I was put into a leadership position at a pretty young age as a young PFC. I was lucky that I came in the Army as a private first class, which is like getting promoted twice, to the 3rd level, because I had some college behind me. Okay. So that, I guess my college did help me in a little bit. So we made a deployment in 88 down to Central America. And shortly after I got back from that deployment, I went on a blind date that a friend of mine set me up with. And him and his wife, like, oh, we got this girl you want to meet, blah, blah, blah. And so they had us both over to their house for dinner and watch a movie that night. And this year, me and that young lady will celebrate our 34th anniversary. So
Congratulations.
yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
That's
So
great. That's great. Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. So we have two adult kids, one that still lives at home and one that lives with his family down in North Carolina with our grandson who just turned 18 months old. So it's a lot better being a grandparent than it is a parent. For anybody that wants to know,
I've actually heard that the real reason to become a parent is so you can be a grandparent.
exactly.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. So after I met Laura, I wanted to see what was going to happen with that relationship. And so I reenlisted to stay at Fort Drum, and because I liked my unit, I liked the duty assignment. So I ended up staying here for a couple years longer. And then I went to Korea by myself, and then to Fort Benning, Fort Lewis, North Carolina, Alaska, Florida. And then I called in some favors to come back to Fort Drum in 2005. And about 90 days later, deployed to Iraq.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I ended up needing to go on the way with the Warriors on the way.
Mm, yeah. So, what did you bring home from Iraq that now needs to be worked on?
That's a difficult question. I, I I don't know if it's stuff that I brought home or stuff that I left over there. I left a lot of my hearing over there, unfortunately, and left a lot of friends over there as well. And I think that's part of what you bring home is what you see and what you do in those situations. It's not meant to be seen or done. So I'm coming up on, I just passed 17 years being retired now. So I got back from Iraq in 06 and I ended up retiring in 07. I could have stayed longer. I could have got promoted one more time, but I got to the point where I was tired of getting shot at and blown up. I wanted to see my kids, grow older. Eventually they're going to get you. It's just a matter of luck. I always tell people I don't necessarily know why I'm here, what my purpose in life is. Maybe we never know, but I'm still here for a reason. I'm a two-time cancer survivor. Since I retired 2013, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and that really took a toll. It came back 9 months later after they removed it, and it just has been one thing after another since then. And so when you put that on top of the injuries and the mental stuff that happened from my deployment and my time serving in the Army, it just takes a toll on you. So I'm hoping that going on this Camino is going to help me maybe reset my mind, my body. I know it's going to reset my body because I'm not in the shape I need to right now to walk every day for a couple weeks. So that's going to focus me between now and the time I leave to get ready and hopefully prepare myself. That's probably one of my bigger fears is the ability to go from point A to point B on a daily basis.
Sure. And starting in Astorga, the first thing you do is climb up a mountain.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And then after you climb up that mountain, you nosedive down the other side.
And then the next day is the same way. And so
Yeah.
I got John Brierley's book and I've been reading through it and I've looked at those graphs. I was like, oh, this is going to be great fun.
Right. Right. Well, we might have to redefine the word fun.
Sure.
So when you tell me your story, Paul, the word warrior really rings true to me when you talk about your time in the service and then two-time cancer survivor leaning towards thriving. It looks like that you really are a warrior at heart. Is that something that soldiers or people in the Army define themselves as when they're in the process of serving? Do you see yourself as a warrior?
Not even and not today either. I just view my time in the Army as I was doing my job, whether it was training for combat, being in combat, teaching others how to train to be in combat. I was a former Ranger instructor down in Florida. I've done a lot of things in my short time in the Army. just said a little over 21 years, but you learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about people, and that's the biggest thing I think that is the people. People always ask, "Do you miss being in the Army?" No, I don't. And not at all. It's changed a lot from when I came in to when I retired. I miss the people. And that's what's great about organizations like Warrior Away. It gets those like-minded people together to get for a common goal, from going from Astorga to Santiago over a period of, say 2 weeks or whatever it ends up being. And you can't do it alone. You're going to lean on the person, the guy or the gal to your left and right to help you, because, we're not all going to have great days. I'm sure of it. Your feet may hurt, your back may hurt, you may just have a thought about something that's happened in the past, or thinking about something in the future, or looking at the next hill you're going up and you're like, am I going to be able to make this?
Mm. So how would someone who has served in the military, what would you be able to take to the Camino that someone like myself who has not served, or anyone who has not served? You have a different mindset, having been a soldier, having served. Who actually goes to the Camino in this case?
I think in that case, the person that's going is someone that has a lot of extra baggage in their backpack, that wants to drop it off and leave it over there. Recently lost my mother-in-law earlier this year. And one of the things I did shortly after I found out I was accepted to go on the Camino with Warriors on the Way is I picked up a big heavy rock out of her driveway. And I'm gonna paint that rock, and I'm gonna write her name on it. I'm gonna write her husband's name on it, who I actually never met. I never met my wife's father. And then I'm gonna write my parents' name on there as well. And I'm gonna think, when I do that, about all the people that I've served with, all the friends that I've lost, both in Iraq and Afghanistan and other conflicts around the world, the ones people know about and don't know about. And I'm going to carry that rock with me. And then on the day, I think it's our second or third day, when we stop, I'll mess up the term of what it's called. I'm sure you can chime in and tell me what the cross is. I'm going to leave that rock there, and hopefully that leaves some of that baggage there, and kind of honor my parents and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law as well, and all those that I served with.
It's called the Cross of Iron, and it is, I don't know how many kilometers. I'd have to check the math, but yeah, it is on your second or third day going up the mountain, and you're almost at the high point. Actually, I think it might be the high point of the mountain range.
I remember looking in John's book, the guide, and I saw it, and I said, okay, that's where we're going, and that's where that is. And having listened to your podcast and other podcasts about this, I haven't a vision, kind of an idea, and I've seen some stuff, but I don't know till they get there.
Yeah. You just don't know what it's going to feel like until you get there. But to have that as a target and know that you're walking towards it with the intention to set down something is a very poignant experience.
Yeah.
When you got back from serving overseas, your final tour, was there a question that you wished that somebody would have asked you? Something that you just really wanted to have the freedom and opportunity to talk about or to share, but nobody asked the right question?
Yeah, I think so. And I've shared with some people over the years that a lot of people think that we were in Iraq for the wrong reasons, and there were no weapons of mass destruction, and so forth and so on. And I'm not going to go down that road, but when you're on a combat patrol, and we did a lot of dismounted patrols in the area I worked in. I was in Baghdad, all of Western Baghdad, and I worked I'm part of what's called a MIT team, military transition team. We work directly with the Iraqi army. And when you have an older Iraqi lady coming up and grabs your arm and says, "Thank you," and you kind of look at her with pause, like, for what? She's like, "My country our neighborhood is so much better and so much safer because you guys are here. Then you're there for the right reason,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know?
So that tells me we should not believe everything we hear on the news.
I would think that's a very good concept.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really valuable to have a firsthand account like that, to be able to see it from the eyes of someone who was actually there and who was there for a purpose, maybe not a purpose that you chose for yourself other than to serve,
Sure.
but to see it from that perspective. Wow, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no
Yeah.
problem.
So let's look at your Camino. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
When you think about it, you imagine yourself meeting up with this group of veterans and those who will be leading the program in San Antonio, getting on that plane and going to Madrid and then transferring up to Astorga. If you could guess what you'd be thinking and feeling when you take your first steps on the Camino.
Probably going to be scared to death.
Hmm.
First of all, I speak hardly any Spanish. So that is something I need to work on between now and then because I have a fear of I'm going to get over there and I'm not going to understand anybody. And as you know, most Spanish speaking individuals speak super fast and wait, slow down. I can comprehend a little bit, but you're going so fast and you're excited and you're talking with your hands and I may not know what anybody's saying. I'll be like lost. And I have pretty bad hearing loss and wear hearing aids. So that makes it even more difficult.
Sure.
Long as we don't have to wear masks like we did in COVID, because relying on reading someone's lips to understand things as someone that has a hearing disability, it was very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the communication barrier. I know everybody said you're going to be fine. Just try a little bit, and they'll talk to you in English, and you'll be good. But I want to honor the host nation that's allowing us to be there so I can communicate and know more than just the basics. You know, so I hope that I can make that happen between now and them. Then that's my goal. So I don't speak very good Arabic anymore, but while I was in Iraq, I got pretty good at speaking Arabic to the soldiers I worked with, and I would go and get lessons from them when I had downtime to learn more. And there's still a few phrases and words and stuff that I know, but it's nothing like it used to be, 20 years ago.
I love that you said that knowing the language helps you honor the people and the culture of the host country. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Mm. Any other concerns that you have going over there?
I think just the walking every day. I'm not the skinniest person I used to be, but I'm not there anymore. I've had some health issues over the last several years since I retired. I've had a back surgery, I've had a shoulder surgery. I don't run anymore. It just hurts. I'm a pretty avid cyclist. I don't do regular cycling. I ride and race recumbent trikes now,
Okay.
both on the road and off road. So I'm hoping that'll help me. Me and my wife at the beginning of the year, when I thought this was going to be a possibility, we started doing some hiking and walking. Ran into this thing called winter that kind of derailed that a little bit. So we're just kind of getting back into that now that spring has joined us. Nothing better than walking, when the wind's blowing at 20 miles an hour and it's snowing and it's
It
like,
takes some of the fun out of it, doesn't it?
yeah, it not just a little bit, or you're in ankle to knee deep snow, or like, no, we can just
Yeah.
let's do this on another day.
Yeah, we can postpone.
So I'm hoping now that the weather's gotten better, we can get out and do a little more hiking and walking. Start carrying a rucksack a little bit more, a backpack, and use the walking sticks and try to do a little bit of training and get to the point where I can walk consistently day after day after day after day and carry the weight and go that distance. And I think just the physical. I don't think I'm worried about my back and my shoulders, just my feet. I got good socks. I got a decent hiking boots. I think I've kind of had hiking shoes. I've tried tennis shoes and hiking boots. So I'm trying to figure out what's best going to work on my feet. Sock combination and shoe combination. I think I got it figured out. what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to keep working on that, and then slowly start adding distance and a little bit of weight to the backpack, and
It's the perfect plan.
yeah, try to figure out. And I don't want to do too much because I don't want to get injured between now and September. But I don't want to go over there and be like, oh my gosh, I got to walk how far today, and it's
Right.
all uphill. Ooh.
Okay, then where's the taxi?
Yeah, I know they said something about there's a lot of wine served at every meal, so maybe that'll help get me from point A to point B.
You know what? Yes, yes, there is a lot of wine served, but I'll give you a cautionary tale on that exact stretch coming down from the Cross of Iron down the hill to Molina Seca. That is the most difficult and treacherous descent of the entire Camino Frances. I was walking down that one year and I developed tendonitis in both legs. And I thought, you know what? I still have a long ways to go. I'm going to pull over. I'm going to have a couple glasses of wine. So I had 2 glasses of wine. It numbed the pain. It worked like a charm. But then I was off my feet for 3 days because it got worse without me feeling it. Yeah. So it's an interesting strategy, but not necessarily the one you want to
Yeah,
employ.
and I think that's what kind of makes our Camino a little bit different than most people's Camino is because, like you said, you could stop for 3 days and rest and relax and hang out and drink some
Yep.
more wine and recover and then continue on.
Yeah.
We're going to start in Astorga, and we have a timeline. So we have every day, we have somewhere we're staying. The
Yeah.
albergues are going to be booked for us. We know where we're going to stay every day, or someone does. I may not know, but and then we have a date that we're going to get on a plane and fly back to San Antonio. So I have to keep going every day. So like I said, that's kind of one of my concerns about walking. That if I was doing it on my own, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to take a rest day today. I'm just going to relax and
Yep.
enjoy the sights and the sounds of Spain and just see what the next day has in store. But that's not going to be an option. And so that's part of the fear of, and I think it's also part of the good thing about walking with the group is that, like I said earlier, if I have a bad day or someone else on the team has a bad day, we're going to be there to lift the other people up, or maybe someone needs you to carry something extra from their rucksack, or give them some words of encouragement and motivation, or whatever that is.
Yes.
We're all different. We've all been through different experiences and different branches of service, I'm assuming, and different MOSs, but we've all been there and we've all done that, whatever that may be, in a combat type situation. And so being with like-minded individuals, I think it helps a lot because it's going to help better understand what that guy or gal is going through. And it might be the
Definitely.
same thing that I'm going through or I've gone through, and we can relate to each other and help each other become better us's.
Absolutely. I love that approach. And it's one of the things that I think about because I do lead groups on the Camino. A lot of people
Right.
say, no, 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 you have to go alone. It's the best way to walk the Camino. And I respectfully disagree, but also, in some cases, absolutely, it's the right thing for the person. But there is such incredible value in sharing the Camino with a group of like minded people, and especially with the goals of this program, of
Right.
what they have in mind for it. Would you share with us what's involved in the program and what happens within that group? Because I'm certain it's different from the kind of group that I lead.
Yeah, certainly. So Father Steve doesn't do this alone. He has a pretty extensive team that goes with us. And I'm pretty sure it includes like a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, something like that. And I forget her name, and she's a doctor. But there's a whole team that goes with us. And part of the process when we get to San Antonio in September is they will do a initial PTSD survey and see where we're at and what our level is. And I'm sure they have a way they've calculated out, and
Mhm.
however they do that. And then we go to Spain and we walk the way, and they talk to us different days, different things, and we'll have group sessions. One thing that has been missing in my life is one of the reasons why I initially applied for Warriors on the Way is not only just to help with my PTSD, but my mortal injury, this some of the stuff that I saw in Iraq, and it, as you can probably imagine, it wasn't always sunshine and roses.
Right.
You're in combat, you know, and people die. And I had a young man that I didn't even know um, die in my arms one day when I was trying to apply a tourniquet on him to trying to save his life. And that there's nothing I could have done to save him. I knew that when I was working on him, but it has taken me many, many years to realize that there was nothing I could physically do. There was nothing anybody could do for that individual at that time. He was our Iraqi national policeman, and they had gotten a firefight 1,000 meters away from us, and they came up, and me and my medic worked on these two individuals that were in the back of this pickup truck, and we did our best to save them, but we put them on a helicopter, but they did not make it. And we I used to blame myself for that for many years, that it was my fault that that individual died, and it wasn't. It was meant. It was his day. You know, it's nothing I could have done, and so that's part of the what I'm hoping is going to be the healing process when I'm in Spain when I'm walking.
Yeah. You know, we see movies, right? We see movies about war and violence and um, gratuitous violence, people shooting and destroying and maiming and mayhem and all that stuff. And we're comfortably thousands of miles away from it when we see
Yep.
it on TV or in the movies. But I cannot imagine, and I don't want to try to imagine what that experience is when it's in your zip code or in
Yeah.
your, within arm's length of you. I
Yeah.
just can't imagine.
It's not fun, and I've seen, you know, people die before. I grew up next to a funeral home when I was a kid. You know, it was just something we did. You know, it was like right there. And I'm a volunteer firefighter now here at home, and unfortunately, we have the same thing here. You know, you come to a car accident and there's someone that's deceased on the scene, and it just kind of makes for a bad day. And
Yeah.
someone's got to go let that person's family know what's happened. And I think that's probably the roughest job is contacting the next of kin. And I wouldn't wish that job on anybody.
Yeah. It really stays with you,
Very
doesn't it?
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to go walk the Camino, which is many people call it a magical experience or a magical place. And you're going to traverse the trail at the pace of walking. Healing does take place. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the team of people that are with you, there'll be Father Steve and the counselor, psychologist, whatever that person is. Anybody else on the team?
Yeah, there is, and I apologize for because I don't know everybody. We're just now starting to get acquainted. We're using Signal to communicate, and we're all starting to get to know each other and going back and forth and stuff. So
Right.
it'll be a process between now and September when we leave, and we'll actually all get to meet in person. It's kind of like communicating with you. You know, we've gone back and forth for some emails and stuff, and this is the first time, you know, being able to see you and face to face. And I've listened to not all but many of your podcasts, and I found your podcast by mistake. But like I said, everything happens for a reason, right?
It does.
I was traveling earlier this year, and I got the end of somebody's podcast, and I was like, well, let me search something else. I'm driving and I'm looking. Okay, I'll listen to that. So I punched in and I started listening to yours, and I listened to like season one all the way through. Then when I got home, I started listening to season two, and I was doing a drywall project. And so I was listening to that. My hearing aids, they're tied to my phone. And as I'm mudding and taping and hanging drywall in a front porch of ours, and that kind of led me to where I'm at talking to you today. So
So we've been hanging out for a while.
yeah, so like I said, everything happens for a reason. We just don't always know what that reason is, you know. So I'm hoping that by doing the Camino, going with the Warriors on the Way, I'm going to help myself become a better me, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. One of the things I say about the Camino is every time I'm on it, I discover and expand a better version of myself. And I like myself more after walking the Camino so many times.
Yeah. And like I started saying earlier, part of it is the spiritual aspect as well, because I was raised in a very Catholic family. I was confirmed when I was 17, 18, whatever it was, in the Catholic Church. And I stopped believing somewhere down the road. I was 25. My mom died of cancer at 59, the same age I am right now.
That is so young.
So it's like, why? You know, how different would my life been? How different would my kids' life have been had they known my mom? So I'm hoping that by going over here and Father Steve doing mass with us every day and celebrating the Lord, that I'm going to get some of that back, something that's been missing in my life.
That's my wish for you, Paul.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sounds like it will be an incredible journey.
I think it will be. I hope it is.
Yeah. So let's imagine that you're in Santiago de Compostela. You've just walked the Camino with this incredible team of support and comrades. I don't know if you use the word comrades or not, but people who share a similar history and a rather intense one. Can you imagine yourself in Santiago?
I can, and I've already thought about listening to your podcast and other podcasts, how I'm gonna bring my certificate of Compostela back in my little cardboard tube, and I'm gonna make it. It's not an option to fail. And I think you asked something about that earlier about the military mindset about walking. It's failure is not an option. You know, I went to Ranger School many years ago, and part of the mantra of the Rangers is they lead the way, and you don't have an option to fail. You make the mission happen no matter the cost, and that's what I'm going to do. So
Yeah, you
it's
find it within, somewhere deep within.
yeah,
You pull out some resources you maybe didn't know you had,
sure,
and you fulfill on the mission.
yep,
And your mission now is to walk from Astorga to Santiago de Compostela.
yeah,
Ah, I just applaud your courage, your strength, and maybe those aren't things that you describe yourself as having, but like being a warrior from the outside looking in, I see those qualities.
yeah. I appreciate that, and like I said earlier, I don't necessarily consider myself a warrior. I'm just an average person that had a job to do, and I continue to serve the best I can, and helping others. And I'm hoping that, like I said, this makes me a better person. I learned something about myself. I learned something about the people, not only the people on the Warriors on the Way team, but all the other pilgrims that we will interact with in our 180 miles from the time we start in Astorga till we get to Santiago. And I've already thought about going back to Spain, and I haven't even been there yet. I've never been to Spain in my life, but I've always already envisioned myself. I talked to my brother the other day about this, and my wife said, "Hey, maybe him, me, my brother, his wife, we should all go over there and do some form of the Camino." I have a good friend that's Portuguese, and we keep telling him, "We're going to fly you to Portugal. You're going to be our tour guide, and
Perfect.
we're going to drink some Portuguese wine." And so maybe
Yeah.
maybe that sometime in the future, we'll do the Portuguese route along the coast or something.
Yeah. It's so interesting that before many people actually, before even going the first time, can see themselves as serial pilgrims, as people who keep going back again and again. There's something about it.
Kind of scary, isn't it?
Well, it's scary and it's interesting. We don't know what it is yet, but we know we're going to want more of what it offers.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Anything else you'd like to share about your story and about what you're taking on?
No, I think that's it, and I just appreciate the opportunity that Father Steve and his team and the whole Warriors on the Way organization is giving me and my fellow veterans. I think he started this in 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. They had that off year because of the COVID. One of the groups didn't go, and they held them for that year, and then they went the following year. So it's good to be a part of this organization, what they're doing for our veteran community, and it's much needed. There's countless numbers of men and women that have served, that have been to combat, that are dealing with demons, and a lot of soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, everybody, they hold that close inside and don't talk about what's happened and don't communicate their feelings per se, and what they're thinking and what their actions are. And, there's a reason we lose on average 22 people a day, former veterans that commit suicide and take their own lives. And I'm trying hard not to become a statistic like that. It's not
Yeah.
fair to me. It's not fair to my friends and my family. And so programs like this, I think they definitely help. And if people are having issues, reach out to somebody, talk to somebody. It could be just a total stranger, but I mean, it's probably the people that maybe that are listening to your podcast aren't that demographic. Maybe I don't know your statistics, whatever, but I found you by a happy accident, and I'm glad I did. And I'm glad that I found out about Warriors on the Way. It's something I knew about for a few years. Like many pilgrims, I saw The Way many years ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's a good movie." It's got a good message, and didn't really think about, oh, I should go do that. And it wasn't until a few years ago, I'm like, I
Hey.
kept seeing about this Warriors on the Way. I said, I don't really know much about that. I did a little bit of looking into it, and finally, this past fall, I said, I'm going to apply and see what happens. The
Yeah.
worst they can do is say no. So I'm very very fortunate, very happy that I'm going to be included.
I think the real story of courage here is that you're doing this, that you are not succumbing and becoming a statistic, that you are taking a stand for your life, for your family, and for that better version of you that has yet to come out. Yeah. So, really, hats off.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's courage. Hmm. So, the Warriors on the Way program, do they take care of all of your expenses or part of your expenses? How does that work?
So they take care of everything from the time we get to San Antonio until we get back to San Antonio. So pay for they'll give us equipment, they'll give us some clothing, some backpack, walking sticks. We got to bring our own hiking shoes, socks, or whatever. Haven't yet got a packing list, but then they pay for the airfare, all of our ground transportation, all the albergues, all the food, drinks, everything the whole time we're in Spain. And then they get us back to San Antonio. Only thing I'm responsible for is my transportation from home to San Antonio and then back. So I'm
Okay.
actually going to fly from my home airport down to San Antonio. They say we're supposed to be here on this date. I'm going to fly the day before because I'm terrified about missing flights. I've missed too many flights. I've been held over places traveling for business, and it's so I'm going to fly the day early and then have a hotel thanks to some Marriott points that I still have, and going to use those up. Not use them all up, but I'll use some of those for that. And then when I'm done with the Camino, I'm going to fly to where my son lives. My wife's going to be there watching our grandson, and I'm going to be able to see them right away when I get back
Great.
the next day. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Oh, wow. So, do you know where the funding comes from for Warriors on the Way? Is it donation based or grant based?
I think it's all donation based. They have a website which is warriorsontheway.org, which is one word, and they have a link on there for donations, and they have a list of their supporters and stuff like that. So
Okay.
it's a pretty worthy cause in my opinion, obviously, because they're taking me to Spain to walk the Camino. I'm
Sure.
pretty excited about that.
Well, you know what? I think it is an incredibly worthy cause. And so I'll make sure that the website is in the show notes. So anyone who wants to make a donation, I just imagine what a gift this would be to more veterans And if they had more funding, could they take more? Could they do more groups?
I think they could. And I think that Father Steve, I've heard him on another podcast, said something that they're going to work on trying to expand this so they do multiple Caminos throughout the year. So maybe they
Right.
have 2 a year. So I think that's the goal of the organization, is eventually they can't take more veterans at one time. It just logistically wise, it's not possible, but
Right.
they could do more Caminos within a year.
Sure.
So I think that's what they're leaning towards,
Ah,
expanding that way. I mean, there's only so many days in a week, so you're
yeah.
kind of tied with
Yeah.
that and logistics of making it effective, because their effective PTSD reduction rate is like right at 70%, 70 or 72% reduction in PTSD. Yeah, it's unheard of.
That's incredible.
So I don't know exactly what all we're going to go through while we're there, but it definitely must work,
Yeah. You don't know the how, but you know the what, and you know what's hopefully on the other side.
right? So that's very exciting.
Wow. I want to call someone in Washington, D.C. and say, fund this program. Yeah, let's get this going. Wow. Well, Paul, thank you so, so much.
Well, thank you, Nancy. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, really great to meet you. And
Likewise.
I'm hoping I run into you on the trail. I'm going to look for your group.
Buen Camino. I hope so as well.
Oh, yes, buen camino. All right, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. Have a great day.
You too. All right.